Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here shortly, but I'd like to give people a few more moments to get their audio preferences settled before we begin. All right, hello and welcome to today's webinar. Before I hand it off to our presenters, I just want to cover a few technical details, just in case you haven't joined ACRO webinars in the past. We use Zoom webinars, which is similar to Zoom meetings, except that your cameras and your microphones are disabled by default. So to interact with each other or with the presenters, you have two main options. To interact with each other or with the presenters, you can use the chat button. This will default to the host and the panelists, meaning only they can see your message. However, if you want to interact with everyone, make sure to select the Everyone tab in the drop-down menu. And if you have any questions, any specific questions for the presenters, please use the Q&A button. You can ask questions anonymously, and you can view existing questions, and you can ask your questions at any time. It is up to the presenters when they feel ready to answer your questions. Kim and Josh will let you know that. And without any further ado, I'll hand it off to our moderators or presenters.
Great, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your, well, almost end of term, very, very busy schedules. We do appreciate you being with us today. My name is Kim Shipwright, and I serve as a strategic advisor for Stellic. My professional career has been entirely in higher education, over 40 years experience in admissions and records areas. Most recently, I was with the University of Nebraska-Kearney as registrar. In addition to my campus responsibilities, I've always been very active in ACRO, serving on committees, writing publications, and serving as the coordinator for the Registrar 101 workshops. And now I utilize that expertise and background to help Stellic foster partnerships with institutions who want to improve the student experience on their campus, which brings us to today's presentation. I'm excited to be joined today by Josh Lind from the University of Wisconsin-Stout. And Josh, I'd invite you to please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Kim. So I'm the registrar at University of Wisconsin-Stout, and I do not have a long bio to read. I know people are probably interested in diving in and getting into the material. I have been in this role since July of 2016, and so it's been a good run so far, and it's an exciting time for Stout as we are implementing Stellic as a degree management tool. So.
Great, thank you, Josh. Just a bit of an overview here. Our focus today will be on bridging the common gaps between degree audit and planning. And so we're going to talk about the benefits of bringing both of those pieces together and really making sure they're fully integrated to support students and to facilitate other processing such as substitutions and exceptions, etc. We'll be hearing from Josh regarding ways to increase the campus adoption of these tools, and especially with regard to students and using these. We're going to explore the critical, but unfortunately often overlooked area of pulling data out of the system and using that information to assist departments and other decision makers on campus. And we're going to invite you again to post questions that you may have in the Q&A section. And if you want to hold until the end of our presentations, that's great. We'll reserve a little time to address questions at that time as well. We'll also be providing a follow-up email with additional information and how you can follow up on this topic should you wish to do so. So just hang in there with us and we'll provide that information at the end. Before we go any further, though, I do want to provide just a quick overview of Stellic itself for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Stellic is a student-centric degree management platform. It was originally built by students who are attending Carnegie Mellon as a way to improve their own degree audit and planning experience. They worked closely with their key stakeholders on the campus, such as the registrar and their advisor, and they were really focused on making sure that students could make the most out of their educational journey, as well as reduce any barriers to graduation. So the idea of coupling the degree planning process and the audit with a student-facing environment is really at the heart of everything we do in Stellic. So today's topic is really in line with our vision. We are currently working with a variety of institutions who are focused on improving the degree audit experience on their campus. And UW-Stout happens to be one of those. And so we are thrilled to facilitate this conversation with Josh today. So we're going to begin, Josh, with a little context for everyone so that we make sure we're all on the same page here. How do you define, if you will, briefly, the difference between the audit and the planner?
Sure, that's a great question. And it's one of the things that brought us into this whole project. A degree audit is basically a tool that students and advisors and a compliance office like a registrar's office can use to determine whether students are meeting the degree requirements for their academic program. And UW-Stout has had a degree audit tool that's provided as part of our student information system for, I guess it's been in place now for about 12 years. And it's fully built out, it's operational, and we do use it to confirm that students are meeting their graduation requirements. But it's not a very good tool for communicating with students about their path toward actually meeting those requirements. And that's where the planner concept comes in. A degree planner is really a tool where students can plot out the terms in which they hope to take the requirements for their program. And so we have been interested in student retention and kind of ensuring that students understand that path and can see that objective and how they can reach their graduation requirements. And we simply haven't had a good tool for that. And that brought us to Stellic. We did a vast search for other tools, but what we were finding is that it's really the integration of a degree audit and a degree planner that's the key. If you have a planner that lets students put courses in, say, this coming fall, and then the following spring, and the fall after that, and the spring after that, and so forth, but it doesn't talk with or understand what's actually going on in their academic record, that it's not a very good planning tool. And so those two things need to connect up and communicate with one another.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So obviously, you mentioned you were trying to improve the ability for students to follow a plan, not just to, have the degree requirements spelled out, but to literally follow their own progress. So any other problems you were trying to solve by looking to integrate Stellic?
Yeah, some of the other factors that were missing was a transparent way for students to understand when their requirements were being adjusted. Students might transfer into your institution and they might need some substitutions to get the courses that they transferred in to meet the requirements of your institution. And, we were finding that the substitution process, which required like its own web form and its own kind of approval flow, that would take time, and then it would come to our office for manual processing. And students were in the dark through that entire process. Was that being approved? Was it not approved? When would they actually get to see it? And these things would have, timely implications. For instance, we're right in the throes of registration. People are registering for the fall semester. And if you were waiting on a substitution to know whether you needed to take a given course in the fall, like transparency matters. It's important. And so one of the things with a degree audit and a planner that go together is the substitutions are requested right in the system. And so you can see when they're requested, you can see when they're approved, and you can see the outcome of their approval right in the same place. And I guess there's no black box in that regard.
Yeah, great. Well, it's always good when students know what's happening with their own progress, and advisors as well. So it's great to have that complete transparency within the system so that they can manage their progress on their own. Any other big benefits that you're seeing from having the planner be so adaptive and certainly having it integrated with the degree audit itself?
Yeah, we're still in implementation phase right now, but we're already seeing some things that are going to be huge wins for us. One of them, actually, I was not fully aware of until we were implementing, and we see now that the student records are available in our Stellic instance, that courses that do get transferred, if it's not a perfect match to a course here at UW-Stout, it ends up with generally like a pseudo course number, like an XXX. And again, kind of back to the whole black box concept, students could have 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, some even number of transfer courses, apparently only even, that were all looked the same. They couldn't tell the difference between them. And so as advisors, we're trying to understand that student record and understand what was a sensible transfer course to use for a requirement or what wasn't. They just had to go through extra steps to go back and look at that transcript or look in another place in our student information system. But with Stellic, that information is actually right in the audit. As you look at that student record, you see not just this is chemistry XXX, but you see the institution from which it transferred, and the term taken and the grade that was received. And so there's, and the course title, that's the whole point, is that there's with that integration, it's all readily apparent, so that there's less frustration about multiple tools and needing to look in multiple places, or even like printing out the students' prior transcripts and trying to kind of cross them off as you find homes for them in our program. That kind of goes away because it's all right there.
And of course, less calls to the registrar's office to help me find out what's going on here.
That is a slight side benefit. I'm not totally self-interested, but yeah, I'll take it.
Yes, that's a win no matter what, right? So it sounds like this really is providing a robust solution for students and advisors alike on your campus, which is wonderful. But how are you ensuring that people are actually going to use it?
Yeah, and this is why I think it's good to have a webinar like this with someone who's kind of in the middle of the implementation. Because if you talk too much afterwards, like afterwards, like there's always like a rosy glow about everything that happened. And we're in the process of working with campus stakeholders right now to increase the awareness of what's coming. Just this week on Monday, we had a session on campus and virtual for our campus stakeholders to basically get a walkthrough of what a degree audit looks like in Stellic. And there's a lot of enthusiasm because we're replacing an audit that's cumbersome and counterintuitive. And when they see kind of the look and feel of it, and the way it can be interacted with and expanded, and that you can see course information. For instance, you can click on a course that's required and get the course information, and like even when it, the last several times it was offered, which term that was in, who's taught the class recently, things like that. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that kind of added value. And so In some ways, some things obviously are going to be a struggle. But in other ways, there's so much enthusiasm about what we're going to be able to offer that as long as we hold the sessions and we communicate outward and we make our, we've got a program director model where every academic program has a different director. If we get out in front of those people and we give regular updates and then sessions like the one earlier this week, those are ways to get the campus buy-in for that. And I see in the question and answer that there was a question about which student information system we're using, and we are a PeopleSoft Campus Solutions campus.
Yes, great. Thank you, Josh, for addressing that as well. I can remember creating, if you will, cheat sheets for students and faculty to use to access, advising systems or whatever. And I think that's one of the neatest things about Stellic is you don't need to do that. It's so intuitive that, again, not only is there more information available there, but it's easy for people to access and to know just from looking at it how to navigate. I mean, it's kind of a Google-based type thing, where they know how to click, they know how to get around in there. So
Right.
I see you having that same experience, which is awesome.
It felt really weird, actually, the session earlier this week, because, it felt so obvious, like what I was describing, because, it's pretty much like you said, it's intuitive. Anyone who looks at it says, well, yeah, of course, that's what it's doing. And that's why it looks that way. And so it does feel a little bit weird to go through it in such detail when it's like, it's so intuitive. I will say that, people have complained that our current system kind of feels like it was, maybe new and fantastic and interesting, like in the 1990s. And although I love a lot of music from the 1990s, like don't get me started on technology from then.
Yeah, it seems like, we've all got a few of those systems laying around that need a little makeover here. So we've talked a little bit about the students and the advisor, but what about the administrative side, and maybe even from the registrar's office perspective? What do you see as the most significant change to occur as a result of where you are now with this implementation?
Yeah, I think for us, as I mentioned, we did have a degree audit tool, and we did use it to confirm compliance with the degree requirements. And so there's not necessarily a value add there. It's just that these things are all going to be easier to accomplish. And so one example of that, as I kind of alluded to before, is the substitution process. Mm-hmm. At present, we have a separate web form and a separate approval process for substitutions. And so it's a bit of a painful endeavor just to get those through the system. But at the end of those approvals, it simply comes to us. We need to go into our student information system and then actually manually process it. The very same thing that the advisor is approving and described on the form, we have to redo and make happen in the student information system. And so from a registrar's office perspective, when we look at that approval process happening in the tool, and that it comes to us when it's approved and we just say, okay, like it's already visible and done. It could take us 3-4 minutes to do a course directive in our current system. And 3 or 4 minutes, even when you're, briskly moving along, is a lot longer than like 2 seconds. So that's definitely a value add for us.
Yeah, that's great. And I think every campus deals with the issue of transfer credit and substitutions. I mean, it'd be all, a bed of roses if all you had to do was build the audit. And so it just reflected what classes the student had taken and they took everything they were supposed to take. So that makes it pretty easy. But darn it, they don't do that, and they transfer in courses or they need substitutions. So I think having a system that's intelligent enough and built on a technology platform that can handle those kinds of things internally it makes a huge difference, again, for not only the workforce in the registrar's office that's trying madly to keep up, but also, again, for that quick turnaround to students and advisors as well. So, yeah, thank you. So that's been very helpful to give us that background, Josh, and I appreciate that. But I think one of the things that really caught my attention with this product was the ability to see data within it. And so let's talk a little bit about what insight you hope to gain from the data feed, and talk about how you go about getting that information out of the system when you're using Stellic.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's really, I mentioned earlier that we were looking for a planning tool, and that's kind of what led us to Stellic. And that's true, but it's really only half true. The other thing that was driving us to make this decision was we need more true and accurate information about course demand in order to, if I don't think our institution is alone in this, that we're facing some resource challenges. And in order to use our resources wisely, we need to know, what is the course demand coming up in the future, so we can have the right instructor pool, we can have the right resources to offer the right number of sections to ensure that students can make progress. So there's like a win-win situation going on here, where this tool is better for students because they get to identify that plan, make that plan for the future. But the institution, on the other hand, gets to look at those plans in aggregate and make decisions about course offerings and when to offer course sections and how many. So what's beautiful about this, though, is that you don't have to be a query writer to find that information. If you, like in our current environment, if you wanted to find out how many students have completed course A successfully, but haven't had course B, because you want to find out, hey, how many sections of course B do we really need to offer? You'd have to go run a query, or you'd have to ask someone who can write a query to get that information. Whereas in Stellic, the student data is already there, the enrollment history is already there. I say it's already there like it was easy peasy. We have done some data integration work that wasn't necessarily easy, but we're definitely seeing the fruits of that labor at this point, because you can easily say, just in terms of like clicking filters, saying, I want students in the BS or the BFA in animation, and I want students who have had Art 100, but who haven't had Design 220. And boom, you've got the list of students right there. And for that not to be a query or a special request to a data office or what have you is one of the big wins for us. Because like I said before, we need to know what it is students, and this is the way I always refer to it. We've gotten those data requests before. Hey, who's had A but not B? And we always, we'll do our best and we'll give it to them. But then there's always the caveat. We don't necessarily know they want to take course B. We just know that, they need course B because it's in their major and they haven't had it, but they have had the prerequisite course A, but we're not in their heads. And what Stellic does is it says to students, hey, put your plan down, and you can use a template plan too, so there's something to start with. And then we're actually in their head, because we know they plan to take the course and when they plan to take it, and the data comes right from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because even institutions that have had a degree audit for a long time and maybe even had somewhat of a form of a planner, some of that was predictive data. I mean, you would say, just like this kid has had Art 1, but he hasn't had Art 2, so I'm going to assume that he's going to take art too. And so it was all based on some assumptions that we tried to make that we thought were based on good data. But now with the planner, it's based on real data. I mean, because the students can actually put down what it is that they plan to take in the next term. And so the institution is functioning not on predictive, but on real data. And then, of course, eventually you'll have trends that you can look at over the years. So looks like we had another question. And the question is about adding a new system and whether it's a time saver and provides efficiency in some areas, but adds work in others. So the question about someone needs to be an admin in the new system and manage access, setup, training. Did you experience this? And did you have to reallocate staff to address this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that we have not added new staff members. We don't have a position that we created and just added to our office staff. It's basically being absorbed by the folks in the office. That has been a challenge during the implementation because there's so much that needs to be worked through. Like I sort of lightly mentioned the data polls that we've been fine tuning to ensure that the data is there and is accurate. It's been a heavy lift, but it's been a team lift by folks who are already on the staff. Other institutions might not go about it that way. We've got an implementation team on our campus. I think it's about 13 people. I deliberately made it a broad-based group, bringing together faculty, staff, and from a multitude of different operational areas. And a lot of the work has fallen on registration and records, our registrar's office. And frankly, I've been doing a lot of the work myself because I'm fascinated and interested in it, and because I want to see this get to the finish line. Yeah, it's been doable. What I see happening is like an influx of workload during implementation, and then because of some of the aforementioned efficiencies, we're going to see actually the degree audit coordinator position, who's been building many of these degree audits. I've been building some of the degree audits. That's going to actually then be reduced because the maintenance of the STELIC degree audit is way easier than building degree audits in our current system, and way more intuitive. And so I think long-term, the staffing that we have in place, the model we have in place, will be successful during implementation and in maintenance. It looks like we might have lost Kim. At least I don't see or hear her. I maybe will just jump into some of the questions that came in the chat, and we'll see if we can get Kim back. There's a question about the learning curve for using STELIC, and that some people have a lot of tech skills, but there are other people who are less tech savvy. The question is, how are non-tech savvy folks approaching STELIC? Are they getting it with minimal training? And at this point, I would say for at least the building of the degree audits, we have taken people. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is we are implementing degree audits for our graduate programs so that we can also use the planner for the graduate programs. And this is new for our institution. And we had to take someone who did not previously ever work with a degree audit system and say, hey, we need you to build degree audits for graduate programs. And we had some training with STELIC personnel early on. And it it is very, very intuitive. And again, I hate to harp too much on our student information system, but the degree audit module in that system is very, very cumbersome. You've got all these nested requirements and course lists and whatever, and it always feels like very, very delicate work. And with Stellic, it's so intuitive. I've been in sessions with, like, I've been reaching out to associate deans and doing demos of what we've got going on so far with the audits. And I've gotten feedback, and they say, you know, we maybe need to track something that's a non-course requirement, and it's like a benchmark for an education program. And as we're talking, I will build it, sharing my screen. I will build that non-course requirement, give it a name, give it a way to be enforced. That non-course requirement, it has to be manually entered. But that's the way they want it. And it's so intuitive that you can actually chew gum and do it at the same time. You can have a meeting and build an audit at the same time. Some of the other things that we will be rolling out, such as like the substitution processing, you know, we'll have to do training in that regard. And so we'll try to learn, you know, what's intuitive and what's not intuitive as part of that. But thus far, it's been very straightforward. It looks like there's another question: how far in advance to publish the course schedule for planning? That's a great question too. What we have so far in our implementation is if a semester class schedule is built out and defined in our student information system, it will come over to Stellic, and it will be plannable, for lack of a better word. But that doesn't prevent students from planning many semesters out. And actually, that's the big win of the tool, is those, like someone planning for fall, that class schedule is already out there. But the following spring, that's not out there at present, but they can still put the courses in that semester, and we can still do the reporting from that. And so it's kind of like the cart is finally coming after the horse. The horse in this case is, we want to know what students want to take, and those students can put that out there for spring. And then we can build a course schedule from that information. And obviously, one of the other things we've talked about as a campus is managing the expectations of students, that just because they put a course in a given semester doesn't mean that will always be offered that semester. But as I alluded to before, the information about when that course has been offered in the past is readily viewable by students and advisors alike.
Okay, I'm back.
Yay.
All because someone mentioned before we went on live that there was going to be technical difficulties, and sure enough, there was. But anyway, I apologize for the delay. I just want to make a comment real quick. Someone had asked about reallocating staff, and I think for those of us who have implemented a degree audit, yes, I mean, there's a lot of work involved initially. It's a little different with Stellic because of the way you build the audit, but ultimately you do not have to have someone on your staff who is a pseudo computer programmer. I mean, the degree audit in Stellic is drag and drop. You don't have to know, certain coding or anything like that. So ultimately, once the implementation is complete, the benefit is you get that time back in spades, because the maintenance of it is so much easier, and it just takes less time to build the new catalog out and those kinds of things. So I wanted to make that comment. And the other thing, when we were talking about the data that comes out of the system, as you pointed out, Josh, I mean, you basically have to have a computer programmer on hand to pull data out of most of the systems. And we would frequently get requests from department chairs or others saying, I need to know how many students still need to take this class or whatever. But I also think that giving advisors a handle on their workload. I mean, some advisors, whether it's faculty or professional staff, have hundreds of advisees, which probably isn't the best situation to have, but nonetheless. And so if they can have a system that they can go to and say, give me all of my advisees who haven't taken calculus, that's required, but they haven't taken it yet, and they're juniors, or give me all the students or all of my advisees who have a, less than a 2.0 GPA and still have a semester, or whatever it might be. For them to be able to get that information immediately from a system and know that it's accurate, I think is a huge bonus for their time. And they can certainly then focus on just the students that really need some assistance, as opposed to wading through a lot of information that, may not be very helpful for anyone. So anyway, sorry, just wanted to add that.
Great point. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to make another little transition here. You talked about your implementation team and the fact that you included people from all over the campus, which is awesome. And so you have a lot of feedback coming in. So what features or functionality are some of these other offices most excited about with this new implementation?
Yeah. I think we had one program director, academic program director on the team. We have one department chair on the team, and we have one person who is specifically associated with our general education program. And so they kind of bring that academic focus to the team, and they're most interested in kind of Stellic as a communication tool, communicating with students about requirements and seeing those requirements displayed in a way that is interpretable and understandable, when things are satisfied, when things are, in enrollment status, when they're not yet enrolled or planned. That kind of student experience is actually what they're most interested in. I know that some of our associate deans are particularly interested in those queries and ability to see that course demand that we've talked about. Those are some big wins for those folks. I think we've got a representative from our provost's office on the team as well. And the provost's office perspective is interested in maybe some of the long-term data that they'll be getting out of this. Our provost's office has a very active role in managing managing academic change on campus. And so we see course revisions come through like mad. We see program revisions one after another. And I think being able to go back and find out specific to individual programs, you can do filters and criteria to quickly find out which courses are students not taking. Like if we've got a program that's 120 credits, we're on the semester system. If there's a part of a degree audit that says, take 15 credits from this list of like 30 courses, there's a way in Stellic of finding out which courses students regularly take from that list, and having that information to go back and find out, is there a way to streamline this program so that we're actually able to offer what students want and not taking the resources to offer things that, yes, students have taken it in the past before, but they did because that's what was on the schedule. If we see this planning data first and no one's planning for these given courses, and it's not, instrumental to the learning objectives of that major, then is there a way to make this more streamlined? And I think those are going to be wins that we'll see down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. There was a question about how students access Stellic. So is it a part of their student portal? I'm assuming that's what you're doing, right?
Yeah, we're still working those details out right now. At present, students don't have access to it, which is good because we're still fine tuning some things. The plan is for there to be from their student center in PeopleSoft, there will be a link for Stellic, and that when they click that link, they'll be they will already be authenticated into PeopleSoft, so they would be authenticated then into Stellic, and it would be it would feel less like another place to go to because they get there like clicking on any other link in PeopleSoft.
Sure, okay. One other thing that brought to mind when you were talking about the provost's office, one of the things that I know other campuses have done is looked for bottleneck courses. So let's take the accounting major or whatever, chemistry, and find out where are students having difficulty, what course is tripping them up. And I mean, there are other ways to get at that information, but I think Stellic makes it very relevant in terms of the timeliness of having that right in front of them. And so departments can, address that in a number of different ways, but it's good to bring that to light, if you will.
Yeah, and one of the things that I hesitate to go into too much, because in some ways we have some institutional decisions to make about how we would want to roll out this functionality. But each time we've talked about filtering down a list of students according to some of these, whether they're student success features like students who have below a 2.5 or students who are in this major who got this grade in this particular class or something like that. Each time you end up with that list, there are communication features in Stellic that allow you to send communications to those students through Stellic. And like I said, we have some institutional conversations to have about when that's appropriate to do, and who would best be set up with the access to do that. But it wows me that the technology is there, not just to get a list, but then to actually do something meaningful with the list, as opposed to going to some other query tool, running the query, exporting it to Excel, trying to find the column with all the email addresses and pasting it into an email thing. And the synergy and the integration of the Stellic tool is something that I'm really excited about.
And I think it's wise that you're taking time out to consider, the best way to approach that communication, because yes, it needs to be well thought through. So again, I'm going to switch just a little bit back to the registrar's office and graduation. Any plans for how you might integrate Stellic into your graduation clearance process?
Yeah, I think we would use batch processing, again, identifying students who have applied to graduate and essentially running their degree audits to see who's clear in batch. And then we can take that information and award the degrees. There's not necessarily a write back feature from Stellic to make it magically award degrees. But we don't currently do that in our PeopleSoft student information system anyway. We run batch audits and run reports, and then we do some manual review just to be careful on some things. But we would anticipate doing something very similar in our office for identifying who's satisfied all the requirements and then awarding their degrees.
Yes, exactly. I know there've been a couple of questions about systems to integrate with Stellic, and I think the bottom line is it doesn't really matter, because Stellic gets a data file, if you will, from the student information system. And so just like you have PeopleSoft, you as a campus decide what data elements need to come over from PeopleSoft. Is milestones important? Is, whatever, course course ID, something, whatever. So you decide what needs to be displayed or featured, and then that becomes part of the data file that feeds into Stellic. So I don't think there's a huge issue. I guess I don't see any issue with whatever system you're running in terms of the student information system, as long as we can get a data file out of there and the institution knows their format well enough to provide that, then that would plug into Stellic. Is that kind of your experience as well?
Yeah, it really is. And we've been very lucky to have so many of our questions answered with the word yes. Yes, we can do that. And so, one example, kind of like you were talking about, is, we have several Bachelor of Fine Arts programs that require a mid-program review. And this is not something that is related to a course. And so that we can't just, check off who's done that requirement based on completing a course. But what we do in our student information system is we put a little flag on them that says they did their mid-program review with their department. And that's already currently being done. That information is already currently in our student information system. And we turn to Stellic and we say, how can we get that so like it magically says they've got their mid-program review done? And they say, yeah, you can take that information, put it in a file, and it can turn into a student tag, and you can tell the audit to look for that tag, and if they have the tag, then they've met the requirement. And so, there's a little bit of work in terms of working with the pipes to make sure everything's connected. But if you've got data and you want it in Stellic, they've been very, very flexible working with us to make those things happen.
Okay. And the question about when did you start your implementation?
Yeah, and actually this hits me in a weak area, and that is I've got a terrible memory for things that happen in time. And newsflash, most things happen in time. But I believe we started in December. It could have been November, but it was somewhere in that time frame. And what I like to say about implementing Stellic is that for us it's really sort of 5 little implementations. On the one hand, it's replacing our current degree audit system with a new degree audit. Well, like that's a pretty heavy lift. That's a project. But then it's also implementing a planner, which we're delighted to be able to do, but it's a project too. And then we've got the class scheduling feature that allows students to build a class schedule in an upcoming semester that is scheduled. And then there's the interactive advising features, like I talked about, being able to email students or identify students meeting certain profiles and working with student success in that way. And then there's the analytics tool. And so it's a fairly big project. And so that, we've been at it for several months now. But some of this is determined by our own pacing. As I mentioned, like we've all got regular jobs trying to keep regular things going and doing this at the same time. And so for us, the pacing it's been fast, but it's been just right. Our goal for implementation is to introduce Stellic to our new first year degree seeking students who come to campus in June for first year registration and orientation. With the degree audits being implemented for fall 2023 requirements, having that group of students see nothing but Stellic degree audits is the goal. And we're battening the hatches and cleaning up little things here left and right, but our anticipation is we'll meet that goal.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a great way to launch, with the incoming class. That's certainly a popular stance that many campuses have taken. So good for you. Speaking of the implementation, what advice would you give to people that are kind of just starting to look at that, or just starting to maybe think about replacing their degree audit? Any tips on what people should be thinking about? What should they do? What should they not do? What have you learned so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had a great answer, but I will say at least one thing, and that is taking the temperature of your campus to find out how much interest there is at the campus level for what essentially is a major change. I mean, I always refer to this as a revolution in how our campus interacts with student records. And so, I mean, is your campus ready for a revolution? I would say that, you know, UW Stout was definitely ready. There had been frustrations with the current degree audit tool, the fact that we had no planner and there was no ability to offer students something that showed the way and kind of kept them on track. In addition to those resource questions we talked about, I did a lot of talking with people at a lot of different levels and a lot of different offices about a planning tool like this. And I think they appreciated hearing about it in advance and knowing that something was happening, like there's a ripple that's starting. And I think people felt good that they were aware at the outset that there was a ripple and that they could contribute and have a conversation about it. And so my goal along the way has been to include people and to reach out to people. I alluded a little while ago to sort of a session with an associate dean where I was adjusting an audit on the fly. That is part of that effort where, you know, we're going to reach out to program directors to say, we built this audit, does it look like your program? Kind of an important step. But before we did that, we wanted to make sure, like, hey, associate deans, we're going to be reaching out to all the program directors, but before we do, we want you in the loop. We want you a part of the process. And so finding out your campus's appetite for a venture like this, and then including people and keeping people in conversation is really critical.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful. A question about, again, the communication capabilities within Stellic, and I think primarily with an advisor communicating with students, you know, as opposed to maybe the registrar's office. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is definitely an area that we're interested in pursuing. As I sort of tipped my hand a little earlier that, you know, this is a no promises conversation because we don't know necessarily where it will go, but these are campus decisions. These aren't like, you know, Stellic functionality questions. Stellic has the functionality there. It's just whether or not we want to use it because it's sort of later in our implementation process. I haven't necessarily investigated all of the functionality and the instances where we would use it or not use it. But my understanding is that those, you know, when you get a list, like let's say I'm a minor advisor for the biomedical instrumentation minor, I can very quickly get that list of students with just clicking in this program, biomedical instrumentation, and then I've got that list. I can click send an email, and I can send an email to that whole group and say, I'm going to be out of the office for 2 weeks due to an unforeseen issue. Please contact this other person if you have questions about advising for this minor. And that's right in the tool. It goes out to the student's email address, and that's my understanding of how that goes. I believe there are also the ability for referrals, and whether like a student is struggling in the beginning of a class, there are referral options, like an early alert kind of thing. Again, we've been working with some other tools for early alerts, and so we're not fully certain whether we're going to go that route. But the fact that all of these communication tools and student success features are available there, again, integrated with all those other pieces, is very, very intriguing to me. And I would like, as a campus, for us to move in that direction.
Yeah, lots of things to investigate once you get the foundation built, isn't there? Right. Speaking of the foundation, we probably should have set the stage earlier, and I apologize, but enrollment at UW-Stout and number of staff in your office, can you give us some quick numbers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the student body enrollment at UW-Stout and the number of staff that you have in your office, maybe, and the number working on a degree audit platform.
Yeah, we've got 12 people in the office, and we've got, I don't know, gosh, I should know the enrollment right offhand. It's 7,000 plus,
Okay.
in that range anyway.
Sure.
And we do a number of things in our office. Obviously, everybody's got a different kind of office setup. So when I say 12 people, and to some that might sound like a lot, to some it might not sound like many, but every office does different features. We've got one person who works with graduate programs and reviews those students for graduation. We've got two people who work with undergraduate programs and review and award degrees for those students. One of those positions is a degree audit coordinator who has a responsibility of building and maintaining the audits. The other one is more of a senior checkout kind of position. And then we've got an associate registrar that oversees these back office functions. And then there's me. I try to be heavily involved in whatever I can get my hands into.
Perfect. Okay, well, that helps kind of clarify maybe the staffing that you have and the number of hands on board that you've got on this project. So thanks. We're getting near the end of our hour. Josh, any closing comments that you'd like to make to our audience regarding the audit and the planner, or anything about your implementation?
Maybe just one thing I'll close with, and that is, this is a bit personal for me. There's a lot of frustrations in higher ed, and there's certainly a lot of frustrations in registration offices. And sometimes it feels like unrewarding to, try to enforce a bunch of rules, and then you get people saying, why are you doing this to me? Why do I need an override? Or why do I need this? I mean, there's just a lot of frustrations in this area in general. And what I'm really enthusiastic about with this project is that it is a very clear way to make a difference in the lives of students. The way they're going to be able to understand their journey as a student. And the same goes for faculty and staff. To be able to finally address some of our pain points, it's just really meaningful to be involved in this project and know that we're making a difference.
Well, I don't think we could have ended on a better note. So thank you. Thank you to Josh for all of your insights today. I think they've been tremendously helpful. Thank you to our audience. There will be a brief poll now that we'll send out, and we'll conclude with that. I would appreciate your input, and if you can all just address that. And again, we'll be sending out an email where you can follow the link to find out additional information on this topic. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.